Jonathan Mercer was a man who had it all. A business empire, sprawling mansions, and a fleet of cars that looked like they drove straight out of a dream. But his most prized possession was his daughter, Emily. He loved her fiercely, but his love was often expressed through a strict, controlling hand. Emily, on the other hand, was a free spirit, kind, intelligent, and blessed with a stubborn streak that often put her at odds with her father. She craved independence, the right to carve her own path, and she despised being told what to do. One bright, sunny morning, the kind of morning that usually promised a day of leisure, Jonathan summoned Emily to his home office. This was unusual. His office was the heart of his empire, a place she rarely entered. A knot of curiosity and apprehension tightened in her stomach as she walked in. She found him sitting behind his massive oak desk, his expression uncharacteristically grave. "Emily," he began, his voice leaving no room for argument, "I have something of the utmost importance to tell you. You are going to marry Luke Carty." The name hung in the air, foreign and jarring. Emily froze, her mind racing. "What? What are you saying, Dad? Luke Carter? Who on earth is that?" Her voice rose with disbelief and panic. She'd never heard of this person in her life. Her father remained infuriatingly calm. "He is a farmer from a nearby village. You will marry him. It is for your own good." The words hit her like a physical blow. A farmer? A poor farmer? The idea was so absurd, so utterly preposterous. She felt a wave of dizziness. Shock quickly turned to white-hot anger. "No. I will never marry someone like him. You can't force me," she shouted, hot tears of frustration and betrayal welling in her eyes. Jonathan didn't flinch. "I am not forcing you without reason. Luke is a good man. You will see the truth in time. This marriage is important, and I have my reasons." Emily wanted to scream, to argue, to demand an explanation that made sense, but she was met with a wall of calm certainty. How could her father, a man who valued status and success above all else, make such a bizarre, ruinous decision for her? It was incomprehensible. Defeated for the moment, Emily stormed off to her room and collapsed onto her bed, her mind a whirlwind of confusion and despair. She thought of her life, the glittering parties, the designer clothes, the circle of wealthy, influential friends. She tried to picture herself on a farm, her hands in the dirt, living in a small, simple house. The image was a nightmare. How could she trade a life of luxury for a life of labor? Meanwhile, miles away in a quiet village, Luke Carter was working in his fields under the same sun. He was a man grounded in the earth. He worked, humble and hard-working. He found joy in the simplicity of his life, in the rhythm of the seasons, and in providing for his family. He had no inkling that the currents of fate were about to sweep him into a world he could unimagine. His best friend, Gavin Brooks, joined him, wiping sweat from his brow. They had grown up together, their friendship as steady as the ancient trees bordering the fields. "Luke, you seem a world away today. What's on your mind?" Gavin asked, sensing his friend's quiet preoccupation. Luke looked up, a faint, thoughtful smile touching his lips. "It's nothing, Gavin. Just thinking about the future. Life is always full of surprises, isn't it?" Gavin nodded, completely unaware that the biggest surprise of Luke's life was just around the corner. The next day was the dreaded meeting. Emily, determined to maintain some semblance of control, chose her most elegant and expensive dress. She wanted to look perfect, an untouchable princess from a world he could never belong to. But beneath the silken confidence, her heart hammered against her ribs. Luke arrived in simple, clean work clothes. There was no pretense about him. He was polite, his smile was gentle, but Emily couldn't miss the quiet strength in his eyes, a self-assurance that wasn't born from money or status. She felt it instantly, and though she tried to dismiss it, a flicker of curiosity ignited within her. As they stood facing each other, the chasm between their worlds felt vast and impassable. His hands were rough and calloused from labor, hers were soft and manicured. She felt a strange mix of embarrassment and fascination. Luke broke the awkward silence, his voice calm and even. "Hello, Emily. I know this is sudden and strange for both of us, but I hope we can try to understand each other." His straightforwardness surprised her. There was no apology, no awkwardness, just a simple, honest appeal. He seemed genuine, kind, even, but she couldn't let her guard down. Admitting any positive quality felt like a concession she wasn't ready to make. From a discreet distance, Jonathan Mercer watched them. A flicker of satisfaction crossed his face. He knew Luke's true character, had known for a long time. But there was more to it than that. There was a secret, a hidden history, connected to Luke's family that no one, not even Luke himself, was fully aware of. Jonathan had orchestrated this all for a reason. He wasn't just arranging a marriage. He was trying to teach his daughter a lesson he felt she desperately needed to learn, a lesson about life, love, and the true measure of a person's worth. He hoped, with all his heart, that Emily would eventually see past the farmer's simple clothes and look into his heart. As Emily drove away from the meeting, her mind was a battlefield of emotions. The anger was still there, simmering just below the surface. But it was now mixed with a confusing swirl of curiosity. She hated the situation, hated the idea of marrying this poor farmer. And yet, something in Luke's steady gaze, in his quiet dignity, had given her pause. Could there be more to him than met the eye? Why would her father stake her entire future on this man? That night, Emily sat by her window, gazing at the moonlit gardens of her vast estate. The meeting replayed in her mind. Who was Luke Harper, really? And what secret was so important that her father would turn her entire world upside down? She felt like a pawn in a game she didn't understand, and she had no idea that her life was on the verge of changing in ways she could never, ever have imagined. The story was only just beginning. After her father's shocking announcement, Emily couldn't sleep a wink. All night, she tossed and turned, her mind replaying the news. Luke Harper, a farmer? The name echoed in her head, a stark contrast to the world she knew, the world of luxury, designer clothes, and extravagant parties. How could she leave all this behind? But her father, Jonathan Mercer, was a man of his word. His decision was final, and she knew arguing was pointless. The wedding was no longer a distant threat. It was a rapidly approaching reality. The next morning, her best friend Chloe Adams rushed over, her face etched with concern. "Emily, I heard what your father decided. Are you really going to marry him?" Chloe asked gently, her voice barely a whisper. Emily just shook her head, tears welling up in her eyes. "I don't even know him. How can he expect me to marry a poor farmer?" "I can't do it, Chloe. I just can't." Chloe wrapped an arm around her, trying to offer some comfort. "Maybe just give him a chance. People aren't always what they seem. You might be surprised." Emily frowned, pushing the thought away. Deep down, a storm of anger, frustration, and fear was raging within her. Meanwhile, miles away in a quiet village, Luke Harper was preparing for the very same wedding. He felt a knot of nerves in his stomach but did his best to hide it. His loyal friend, Gavin Brooks, was by his side, helping with the preparations. "Luke, are you ready for this?" Gavin asked, a slight laugh in his voice. "I mean, marrying the daughter of a millionaire." Luke managed a faint smile. "I don't know, Gavin. Everything is so sudden. But I want to do what's right. I'll respect her and her feelings. That's all I can do." Gavin nodded in understanding. "Just be yourself, Luke. She might see your heart, not your money. And remember, you have nothing to hide." The day of the engagement arrived, and Emily had to travel to the village to meet Luke officially. She stepped out of the car in a beautiful, expensive dress, feeling every bit the fish out of water. As she entered the small village house, she couldn't hide her shock. Everything was so simple, so rustic. A small kitchen, humble wooden furniture, and endless green fields stretching out from every window. It was a universe away from her sprawling mansion. Luke greeted her at the door with a polite, steady smile. "Emily, welcome. I know this is hard for you, but I hope we can try to understand each other." Emily was taken aback. She had expected someone rough, maybe even arrogant, but he was calm, polite, and his eyes held a surprising kindness. She quickly looked away, determined not to show any sign of being impressed. During lunch, the differences between their lives became even more glaring. Luke ate simple, hearty food. Food he had likely grown himself. He spoke about his day, the hard work it took to manage the farm, and the small joys he found in it. Emily wanted to silently criticize everything, to find fault in his simple existence, but instead, she found herself listening. She was strangely curious about how he managed to be so calm, so content with so little. Gavin sat nearby, cracking jokes and telling stories, trying his best to ease the tension and make her feel more comfortable. After lunch, Luke offered to show her around the farm. She reluctantly agreed. As they walked, she saw chickens pecking at the ground, rows of vegetables growing under the sun, and a few small animals in a pen. She felt completely out of place. Her pride screamed at her to leave, to run back to her sanitized, perfect world. But something about Luke's presence made her hesitate. He was so gentle with the animals, so careful with his words, and so honest in his actions. There was an authenticity to him that was both foreign and compelling. Emily couldn't explain it, but she felt a tiny, reluctant pull towards him, a feeling she would never, ever admit out loud. Later that evening, back in the guest room her father had arranged for her, Emily replayed the day in her mind. She was frustrated with herself. Why did she notice how kind he was? How could she feel anything but contempt for the man she was being forced to marry? She had to be careful, to keep her guard up. But a small part of her was undeniably curious about his past. There was something different about Luke Harper, a depth she couldn't quite fathom. Back in the main house, Gavin spoke to Luke quietly as they cleaned up. "Do you think she ever like you?" he asked, his voice full of concern for his friend. Luke stared out of the window, his gaze lost in the darkening fields. "I don't know, Gavin. I can only be myself. That's all I can do." Gavin smiled, a warm, knowing smile. He understood his friend's honest, unwavering heart. And far away, in his lavish office, Jonathan Mercer watched from a distance, a hidden file on his desk. He was keeping a powerful secret, a secret about Luke's past. He knew that soon Emily would stumble upon a truth that would shatter her perceptions, a truth that would change her opinion of Luke Carter forever. He just hoped that through all of this, his daughter would finally learn the real value of love, honesty, and character, things that money could never buy. Emily was confused, torn between her old life and this new, unexpected reality. She didn't like this marriage, but she couldn't stop thinking about Luke. The wedding day dawned, a day Emily had once dreamed of, but now it felt like a nightmare. She was a prisoner in a beautiful white dress, her reflection a stranger in the mirror. Outside her window, the village sprawled out in a sea of green, peaceful and picturesque, but to Emily, it was a cage. How could she possibly build a life here, so far from everything she knew, with a man who was her complete opposite? The thought felt absurd, impossible. Miles away, in a humble cottage, Luke was getting ready. His suit was simple, nothing like the extravagant clothes Emily was used to. It was clean, neat, and understated, much like the man himself. His best friend, Gavin Brooks, was there, offering a steady hand and a calming presence. As he adjusted Luke's tie, Gavin gave him a small, encouraging smile. "You're going to do fine, Luke," he said softly. "Just be yourself. Be honest. Be kind. That's all she really needs to see." Luke took a deep breath and nodded, his expression resolute. "I will do my best, Gavin. That's all I can do." He knew this wouldn't be easy, but he was determined to face it with integrity. The entire village seemed to have turned out for the ceremony. The small hall was packed with fastest neighbors, friends, and family, all buzzing with a quiet excitement. When Emily entered, a hush fell over the room. On her father's arm, she was a vision of elegance, a city jewel in a rustic setting. But beneath the stunning facade, her heart was a leaden weight. She could feel hundreds of eyes on her, their gazes a mix of curiosity and awe. In that moment, the dam of her composure cracked. A wave of anger and betrayal washed over her. How could her own father do this to her? Force her into this life, this marriage? At the altar, Luke stood waiting. His posture was calm, his face a mask of serene composure, but inside, his nerves were a jumble. He wanted so badly to make a good impression, not to impress her with wealth or status, but to show her the man he truly was. Gavin stood beside him, a silent pillar of support, offering a reassuring nod that spoke volumes. The ceremony began, and Emily did everything she could to avoid looking at Luke. Her eyes darted around the room, focusing on the simple floral decorations, the rough-hewn wooden beams, the faces of the villagers. She tried to ignore the man standing beside her, the man who was about to become her husband, but her curiosity was a persistent hum beneath her anger. Why was he so calm? Why wasn't he arrogant or smug? Why did he seem so content? As the minutes ticked by, she started noticing things. Small gestures that didn't fit the picture she had painted of him in her mind. She saw the way he greeted the village elders, with a genuine respect that was both warm and formal. At one point, he quietly stepped aside to offer a glass of water to an elderly woman who looked faint, bowing his head slightly as she took it. Each act was a tiny chip in the wall of her fury. Confusion began to cloud her anger. How could this simple farmer, a man with seemingly so little, possess such an innate sense of grace and kindness? From the front row, Jonathan Mercer watched his daughter, his expression a mixture of hope and apprehension. He was the architect of this union, and he knew more than anyone else in the room. He knew about Luke's past, the hidden chapter of his life that made him far more than just a villager. Jonathan's plan wasn't born of cruelty. It was a desperate, unconventional lesson. He wanted Emily to discover Luke's true character on her own, to see the strength and nobility that had nothing to do with money before the whole truth was revealed. He hoped she would learn to value integrity, courage, and a love that couldn't be bought. The moment came for the exchange of rings. The priestess' voice was a dissonant drone as Emily's father placed the simple gold band in her palm. When she turned to Luke, her hand trembled so violently she thought she might drop it. Every instinct screamed at her to run, to pull away, to end this charade. But then she looked into his eyes. And she paused. There was no pride in them, no hint of triumph or arrogance. There was only a quiet sincerity, a profound respect that seemed to reach out to her. Her breath hitched. Slowly, hesitantly, she slid the ring onto his finger. Her touch was feather-light, a strange current passing between them. The hall erupted in applause. Luke turned to her, and for the first time, he smiled. It wasn't a wide, flashy grin, but a gentle, genuine smile that crinkled the corners of his eyes. And in that smile, Emily saw something she hadn't expected, a connection, a tiny, fragile spark. She wanted to look away, to break the gaze and retreat back into her anger, but she couldn't. For one fleeting second, a thought flickered in her mind. Maybe, just maybe, there was more to this man than she had ever imagined. Later, at the wedding feast, the feeling lingered. The celebration was a simple, joyous affair, held in the open air under strings of fairy lights. Emily sat stiffly, an observer at her own party. She watched Luke as he moved through the crowd. He wasn't lording over them as a groom. He was one of them. He helped serve food, his sleeves rolled up, a friendly word for everyone. When a group of children accidentally spilled a pitcher of water, he didn't scold them or show a hint of frustration. He just laughed, grabbed a cloth, and gently cleaned up the mess, ruffling one of the kids' hair as he stood up. A strange warmth bloomed in Emily's chest. It felt like admiration, but the emotion was so foreign in this context that she couldn't quite name it. She still didn't understand him. She didn't understand this place or this new life that had been forced upon her. But she was starting to see that his kindness wasn't an act. It was the very fabric of his being. That night, alone in her new room in Luke's small house, sleep was a distant shore. The scent of wood smoke and lavender hung in the air, so different from the city perfume of her old life. She lay in the darkness, replaying the day's events. The anger was still there, a bitter pill she couldn't swallow. But now, it was mixed with something else. A flicker of curiosity, a sliver of doubt. She thought of his calm eyes, his gentle smile, his effortless kindness to the people around him. She was still a captive, still furious at her father's betrayal. But for the first time, a tiny part of her began to wonder if this prison might hold a secret. If maybe, just maybe, Luke was someone worth knowing. As the moon cast long shadows across the floor, a question echoed in the silence of her heart. Will Emily ever find a way to accept Luke and this new life? And what is the secret Jonathan Mercer is so carefully guarding? A secret with the power to change everything. The answers were still hidden, waiting to be discovered in the days to come. The days after the wedding were not easy for Emily. Leaving behind her grand mansion, she found herself in Luke's small, simple house in the village. Everything felt alien. The creak of the wooden floors, the compact kitchen, and the profound quiet of the mornings were a world away from the life she knew. She yearned for her luxurious comforts, her circle of friends, and the endless stream of glittering parties she used to attend. Luke saw her struggle. He watched her pace restlessly, a shadow of her former vibrant self. But he never complained or pushed her. He simply went about his day with quiet diligence, tending the fields, feeding the animals, and managing his farm with a steady hand. He tried to ease her into this new life, always careful not to make her feel pressured or incompetent. One morning, as she struggled to haul a bucket of water from the well, her arms trembling with the unfamiliar strain, he approached her gently. "Emily, don't worry about the chores. Take your time. I'll help you," he said, his voice soft. Emily felt a flash of annoyance at her own helplessness, but she couldn't deny the warmth in his gesture. His kindness, as much as she tried to resist it, chipped away at her frustration. Gavin Brooks, Luke's ever-cheerful friend, became a frequent visitor. He'd arrive with a grin, determined to lighten the atmosphere with his jokes and colorful stories about village life. "Emily, you have to learn to milk a cow. It's fun, I promise," Gavin declared one sunny afternoon, his eyes twinkling with mischief. Emily just groaned, slumping into a chair. "I am never going to get used to this. I belong in a big city, not a farm." Gavin simply laughed, a warm, booming sound that echoed in the small yard. He seemed amused by her stubborn resistance. Luke, as always, just watched from a distance, a silent, hopeful expression on his face, praying that she would one day find her footing. Over the next few days, Emily decided she couldn't just sit around and mope. She had to do something. She started to help in the kitchen, her movements clumsy at first. She learned the rhythms of the farm, feeding the clucking chickens and even trying her hand at planting vegetables in the small garden patch. She fumbled and made countless mistakes, but Luke was always there, a patient guide. He'd show her how to hold the tools correctly or how to tell which plants were weeds, never once showing a hint of frustration. It was during these moments that Emily started to see a different side of him. She noticed the small things, the way the other villagers greeted him with genuine respect, the way his face would light up with a boyish grin at some small joy. In the deep, unwavering care he showed for everyone and everything around him. He wasn't just a simple farmer, he was the quiet heart of this community. One evening, while aimlessly exploring the nooks and crannies of the small house, Emily's eyes fell upon a heavy, locked chest tucked away in the corner of Luke's room. Her curiosity was instantly piqued. Later that night, she asked him, trying to sound casual, "Luke, what's inside that chest?" Luke's usually open face turned serious, and a guarded look came into his eyes. "It's private, Emily. Something I want to keep to myself for now," he replied calmly but with a finality that discouraged further questions. His response only fueled her curiosity. Why was he so secretive? What could be so important that he had to lock it away? Her mind raced with possibilities, and she couldn't stop thinking about it. As the days turned into a week, Emily realized that living with Luke was teaching her lessons she never could have learned in her gilded cage. She was learning patience, not just with the farm chores, but with herself. She was learning humility, discovering that she didn't know everything after all, and she was learning to appreciate the simple joys of life. She began to laugh at small, silly things, like the time a feisty chicken chased her around the yard, or when Luke, trying to help her carry laundry, tripped and spilled a bucket of water all over himself. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, she began to find slivers of enjoyment in this new life, even if her pride would never let her admit it out loud. One clear night, Emily and Luke sat on the porch steps, looking up at the blanket of stars that shone with an intensity she'd never seen in the city. The village was wrapped in a peaceful silence, the air cool and crisp against her skin. A strange sense of calm washed over her. "Luke, I don't know how to live like this," she confessed, her voice barely a whisper. Luke turned to her and smiled, a gentle, reassuring expression. "Emily, life is simple here, but it is honest. That's all that matters. You will learn to love it in time." Emily looked at him, really looked at him, and saw the profound calm in his eyes and the sincerity of his smile. For the very first time, she felt a flicker of something she hadn't thought possible: respect. Meanwhile, far from the quiet village, Jonathan Mercer watched from a distance. He had arranged for secret updates on Emily and Luke's new life together. A pleased smile touched his lips as he read the reports. Emily was slowly, reluctantly, adjusting. More importantly, she was beginning to see past Luke's simple exterior to the true character within. Jonathan knew the journey was far from over. The next step was for Emily to uncover Luke's secret, the contents of that locked chest. He knew that this secret held the power to change not just her feelings, but the entire course of her life. By the end of that first week, Emily came to a surprising realization. She didn't hate Luke, not as much as she thought she would. Anyway, the anger over their forced marriage still simmered beneath the surface, but it was now mingled with a growing curiosity. A small, undeniable part of her wanted to understand this quiet, patient man. She wanted to know who he really was. The life she thought was a prison was slowly revealing itself to be something else entirely, and she was standing at the edge of a discovery that could change everything. Thank you for watching. What do you think? Days turned into weeks, and slowly, Emily started to feel more comfortable in the village. Life was still a world away from what she was used to, but she began to notice the small things she'd never appreciated before. The crisp, fresh air in the mornings, the profound quiet that settled over the fields at dawn, and the warm, genuine smiles from the villagers who now greeted her by name. It was a simple existence, but it was real. Luke noticed the changes in her, too. Emily still had her stubborn streaks, moments where her city-bred pride would flare up, but she was different. He saw her learning to laugh at small, silly things, like a clumsy chicken tripping over its own feet. She started helping with chores without being asked, her hands, once soft and manicured, now showing the first signs of hard work. She even joined him in the fields occasionally, her initial reluctance giving way to a quiet curiosity. One sunny morning, they were planting vegetables together, a task Emily had once considered beneath her. She was carefully placing seeds into the soil when her hand slipped, and the entire basket of seeds tumbled to the ground, scattering everywhere. A wave of panic washed over her. She'd ruined it. All that careful work, gone in an instant. She expected him to be angry, to scold her for her clumsiness. But instead, Luke just smiled gently. "Don't worry, Emily," he said, his voice calm and reassuring. "Mistakes happen. It's okay. Let's just try again, together." Emily looked up at him, truly looked at him, and saw a depth of patience she'd never encountered. He never judged her, never raised his voice, no matter how many times she stumbled. And for the first time, a spark ignited within her, not of anger or resentment, but of respect. A warmth she hadn't expected to feel. Gavin Brooks, ever the cheerful observer, often visited, his booming laughter echoing through their small farm. He loved to tease them about their bickering. "You two are slowly becoming a good team," he joked one afternoon as he watched them work in surprisingly coordinated rhythm. Emily rolled her eyes, a reflexive habit, but she couldn't suppress the small laugh that escaped. She couldn't deny it. Luke had a way of making this difficult life easier, more pleasant, almost enjoyable. His steady presence was like an anchor in the unfamiliar sea of her new reality. One evening, as the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the village, Emily and Luke went to the community pond to fetch water. It was a daily ritual, one she'd initially despised. But tonight, as they walked side by side, the silence between them was comfortable, not awkward. Emily found herself watching Luke. She saw him stop to help an old woman carry a heavy load of firewood, not for praise, but simply because she needed help. He spoke to her with such kindness and respect. Then, he gently redirected a group of children playing too close to the water's edge, his voice firm but friendly, ensuring they were safe. A profound shift occurred in Emily's heart. She had spent her entire life believing that wealth and status were the ultimate measures of a man. But watching Luke, she saw that kindness, honesty, and a sense of duty mattered so much more. These were qualities that couldn't be bought, only earned. As the days melted into one another, Emily found herself sharing small, unguarded moments with Luke. They would laugh together at her clumsy attempts to milk a goat. They started talking, really talking, about their childhoods, his, filled with stories of running through fields, hers with tales of lonely afternoons in a vast, empty mansion. They even spoke of their dreams for the future. Emily realized with a jolt that she was starting to genuinely like him, not because he was secretly a prince or a wealthy heir, but because he was Luke. He was genuine, caring, and in his own quiet way, incredibly brave. He faced every hardship with a steady resolve she'd never seen in any of the rich, polished men from her past. But one thing still gnawed at her, the locked chest in the corner of his small house. It was a constant, silent presence, a repository of secrets she couldn't access. Her curiosity, a trait she'd always possessed in abundance, finally got the better of her. One quiet evening, she gathered her courage. "Luke," she began, her voice softer than she intended. "Can I ask you again about that chest? What's inside it?" Luke turned from the fireplace, his face illuminated by the dancing flames. His eyes were serious, holding a gravity she hadn't seen before. "Emily," he said, his tone gentle but firm, "it is something very personal. One day, when the time is right, you will know. For now, I need you to please trust me." Emily nodded, her heart sinking slightly. She wanted to press, to demand an answer, but something in his gaze stopped her. She agreed, but the mystery only deepened, making her more certain than ever that Luke was hiding something important, and she was determined to find out what it was. Meanwhile, miles away in the city, Jonathan Mercer received regular updates and observed everything from afar. A smile played on his lips as he read the reports. Emily was changing, just as he had hoped. She was shedding her spoiled, entitled skin and discovering a new self. She was learning patience from the slow growth of crops, understanding from the needs of the villagers, and the immense value of simple, unvarnished honesty. He knew the day was coming when she would discover Luke's secret. He also knew it would completely upend her world, surprising her in a way she could never anticipate. The final piece of his plan was falling into place. Back in the village, as another evening drew to a close, Emily and Luke sat near the crackling fireplace in his small, cozy home. A comfortable silence enveloped them. Emily looked at Luke, who was mending a tool with focused precision. She realized, with a sudden clarity, how much she enjoyed his company. She found herself laughing at his understated jokes, noticing the gentle way his hands moved, and feeling a strange flutter in her chest whenever he turned his gaze on her. It was a feeling she'd never experienced before, confusing, dizzying mix of nervousness and excitement. It was nothing like the calculated courtships she was used to. This was raw and real and terrifying. The thought echoed in her mind, a question she was almost afraid to voice even to herself. Could it be possible? Could she actually be falling in love with someone she was forced to marry? Could Luke, a simple, unassuming farmer, truly be the one to change her life in ways she never, ever imagined? She didn't have the answers yet. But as she sat there, watching the firelight dance in his eyes, she knew one thing for certain. Her heart, once closed off and guarded, was slowly, tentatively, opening to him. A future she had once dreaded was now becoming a future she was starting to hope for. But secrets have a way of coming to light, and the contents of that locked chest held the power to change everything, for better or for worse. The biggest test of Emily's newfound heart was still to come. The night was calm, but inside Harper's heart, a storm was brewing. She sat on the porch steps of the small farmhouse, her gaze lost among the countless stars. Not far away, the rhythmic sound of a hammer echoed from the barn. Luke was fixing the door, or at least pretending to. He was trying to keep himself busy, trying not to stare at her. But he couldn't help it. He kept glancing over, again and again. And Harper noticed. She felt his eyes on her, and a strange warmth spread through her chest. Ever since she had returned from the city, with tear-stained cheeks and a haunted look in her eyes, Luke had been different. He was softer, more gentle, He never asked what happened, never pushed her to talk about the shadows that followed her. He simply existed in her space, a quiet, solid presence. He was like a shield, always near, ready to protect her from a world that had become too frightening. The silence between them stretched, filled only by the chirping of crickets and the distant hammering. Finally, Harper couldn't bear it any longer. Her voice was barely a whisper when she spoke. "Luke, are you mad at me?" The hammering stopped. Luke turned, his expression clouded with confusion. "Mad? Harper, why on earth would I be mad at you?" She hugged her knees tighter, her voice trembling slightly. "Because of my father. Because he tried to ruin your land? Because you're stuck with me now? Your entire life has been turned upside down because of my family." Luke put the hammer down and walked towards her, his steps slow and deliberate. He stopped just before the porch steps, looking up at her. "Harper, you didn't ruin anything? You saved me. You were the one who warned me. You stood up to your own father for me, for this farm. That's not something to be sorry for. That's something to be proud of." His words were like a soothing balm on her frayed nerves. Her eyes, which had been wide with worry, softened. "I'm scared, Luke," she admitted, her voice cracking. "My father, he's not going to stop. He won't let this go. I know him." Luke came and sat beside her on the steps, leaving a respectful distance between them, yet his presence was a comfort. "I know James Walsh is dangerous," he said, his voice low and steady. "But you're not alone in this anymore. You have me." Harper looked up at him, truly looked at him, searching his face in the dim moonlight. "Why?" she asked, the question escaping before she could stop it. "Why are you being so kind to me after everything?" Luke didn't answer right away. He looked up at the vast star-dusted sky, as if the cosmos held the courage he needed. After a long moment, he turned his gaze back to her. "Because you're not the person everyone thinks you are, Harper. You're not just some rich man's daughter. You're strong, you're good, and I care about you." Her breath hitched in her throat. No one had ever said anything like that to her. Not with such raw, simple honesty. She felt a familiar warmth prickled the back of her eyes, the beginning of tears, but this time, they weren't from sadness or fear. They were from something else, something she couldn't yet name. Before she could find the words to respond, a figure came rushing up the long driveway, his feet pounding against the gravel. It was Gavin Brooks, their neighbor, his face pale with urgency. "Luke, Harper," he yelled, panting as he reached them. "I just got back from town. Your father is here." Harper froze, the blood draining from her face. "My father? Here? But why?" Gavin leaned against the porch railing, catching his breath. "People saw him. He was with some lawyer, a city slicker in a fancy suit. They're at the diner right now, meeting with someone. It looks like they're planning something big." A wave of ice-cold fear washed over Harper. It was happening again. "Luke," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "He's coming for your farm. For everything." Luke stood up, his posture rigid and firm. For a split second, Harper expected to see panic in his eyes, but there was none. His voice was as steady as a rock when he spoke. "If he wants a fight, he's not going to win this time." Gavin looked from Luke to Harper, his expression laced with doubt. "Luke, man, be realistic. James Walsh has money, power. He has connections we can't even imagine. What do we have? It's just us." Luke's gaze found Harper's, and she saw a fire light up in his eyes. It wasn't anger. It was pure, unyielding determination. "That's enough," he said, his voice ringing with conviction. "We're going to stop him. But we can't just react. We need a plan." Harper's voice shook as she looked at him. "Luke, what if he tries to hurt you? He's capable of anything." Luke's expression softened as he looked at her. He reached out and gently touched her shoulder, a simple gesture that sent a current of warmth through her, calming the tremor in her hands. "Then he'll have to go through me." And in that moment, something inside Harper shifted. A new feeling bloomed in her chest, a kind of courage she'd never known she possessed. The fear was still there, a cold knot in her stomach, but it was no longer overwhelming. She didn't want to be protected anymore. She didn't want to hide behind Luke. She wanted to stand beside him. "I want to help," she said, her voice stronger now. "I want to face him too." A flicker of admiration crossed Luke's face. He nodded slowly. "Then we face him together." Gavin, catching the resolve that passed between them, straightened up and nodded. "All right, if we're doing this, we need to know what we're up against. We need proof of whatever he's planning." "Gavin's right," Luke agreed, his mind already working. "Tomorrow morning, we go to the diner. We get a table nearby. We listen. We find out exactly what he's up to. No more running. No more hiding." Harper swallowed hard. The thought of being in the same room as her father, of hearing his voice, terrified her to her core. But then, Luke gently took her hand. It was just for a second, a fleeting touch, but it sent a surge of strength through her. It was an anchor in her storm. "Thank you," she whispered, looking into his eyes. For not giving up on me? Luke's voice was softer than she'd ever heard it. I never will. As the three of them stood there, under the quiet glow of the moon, something profound shifted between Harper and Luke. It was something real and unspoken, something deeper than a forced marriage or a sense of duty. It was the quiet, tentative beginning of loveliness, strong, and built on shared struggle. But they had no idea what was truly in store. They thought they were preparing for a legal battle, a fight for land. They didn't know that James Walsh was orchestrating something far more sinister, far more dangerous than they could ever expect. And tomorrow, when the sun rose, the truth, the next morning, arrived far too quickly. Harper had barely slept a wink, her mind racing with a mix of fear and determination. When she stepped outside, the air was crisp and cold. Luke and Gavin were already by the truck, their silhouettes dark against the pre-dawn light. She wrapped her arms around herself for warmth as she climbed in. Luke turned to her, his expression serious. "Ready?" he asked. Harper managed a small nod, though her heart felt like it was doing gymnastics in her chest. They drove towards the small-town diner, a place that served as the local hub for breakfast and gossip. It was the kind of place where everyone knew everyone's business. Luke parked a little way down the street, hoping they could remain unseen. Through the large front window of the diner, Harper's eyes found him. James Walsh. Her father? He was sitting in a booth, deep in conversation with a lawyer and another man she didn't recognize. Her breath caught in her throat. Luke placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "Stay behind me," he whispered. "We won't go in unless we absolutely have to." They moved closer to the building, blending in with the morning foot traffic. A window was cracked open just enough for them to catch snippets of the conversation inside. James's voice was sharp, cutting through the low hum of the diner. "I want that farm taken today. Luke Reed must sign over the deed. If he refuses, we have other ways to persuade him." A wave of nausea washed over Harper. "He's really going to destroy his life just for this," she murmured, her voice trembling. But the words that came next sent a shockwave through all of them. "And make sure no one finds out the truth about Harper. If that story gets out, I lose everything." Harper's eyes widened in disbelief. "The truth? About me?" Beside her, Luke and Gavin exchanged baffled looks. The lawyer leaned in, his voice a low whisper. "Sir, are you sure you want to keep hiding it? She deserves to know the truth." James slammed his hand on the table, the sound making several patrons jump. "She is not my real daughter. If this comes out, the media will eat me alive." The world around Harper went completely silent. It felt as if all the air had been sucked out of her lungs. Luke's voice was a soft whisper near her ear. "Harper, did you know about this?" She could only shake her head, the movements slow and numb. Tears began to well in her eyes. "No, I didn't. My fa Janesi raised me since I was a baby. I thought I was his." Inside, James's rant continued, oblivious to his audience just outside the window. "Her real father was an employee of mine who died years ago. I took Harper in to make myself look generous, a benevolent hero. But she has no biological right to my name or my fortune. And I will not let some worthless farmer ruin the public image I spent a lifetime building." Harper's knees buckled. Luke reacted instantly, his strong arm catching her before she could fall. Gavin, his face a mask of shock, whispered, "He used you. All this time, just for his image." Soft sobs escaped Harper's lips. "I wasn't his daughter. All this time, I was just a tool." Luke pulled her into a gentle hug, his embrace firm and protective. "No, Harper, you are not a tool. You are your own person. You're strong, and you're kind, and you are good. He doesn't get to decide what you're worth." Hearing those words from him, something shifted inside her. For the first time, she truly believed them. She wiped her tears, a new resolve hardening her features. She pulled back and looked at Luke. "I need to face him." Luke gave a firm nod, his eyes unwavering. "I'm with you." Together, they pushed open the diner door. The cheerful bell chimed, and every head in the place turned to look. Harper walked straight toward James's table, her steps confident. He looked up, his expression shifting from surprise to pure fury. "Harper, what are you doing here?" She stood tall, her voice clear and strong. "Tell me the truth. Am I your real daughter?" James's mouth opened, a lie already forming on his lips, but she cut him off. "Don't?" "I heard everything." A hush fell over the entire diner. Every eye was on them, every ear straining to listen. James let out a sigh of pure annoyance, slumping back in his seat. "Fine. No, you're not my biological daughter, but you're better off not knowing the details." "No," Harper interrupted again, her voice steady as a rock. "You don't get to decide what I know anymore. And you don't get to hurt, Luke." James shot a venomous glare at Luke. "This farmer has been filling your head with nonsense." Luke stepped forward, his presence calm but unyielding. I didn't have to fill her head with anything. She heard the truth with her own ears, and she deserves it. James shot up from his seat, his face red with rage. You think you can just take her from me? Harper shook her head, a sad smile on her lips. I'm not being taken, James. I'm leaving. He froze, the words hitting him like a physical blow. You're leaving me. Harper nodded. You never loved me. You only used me. And I won't stand by and watch you destroy an innocent person. Whispers erupted around the diner. Phones were suddenly being held up, recording the entire scene. The realization dawned on James's face. He had lost control of his carefully crafted narrative. Panicked and utterly defeated, he slowly sank back into the booth. Harper turned to Luke, her eyes soft but full of a newfound strength. Let's go. Luke took her hand. It wasn't a gesture of obligation or duty this time. It was a choice. They walked out of the diner together, hand in hand, with Gavin following close behind. Outside, the morning sun felt warm on Harper's skin for the first time that day. She looked up at Luke, her heart full. Thank you for helping me find the truth. And for staying with me through all of this. Luke smiled, a genuine, gentle smile that reached his eyes. Harper, I didn't stay because I had to. I stayed because I care about you. Taking a deep breath, Harper whispered the words she'd been holding back. I care about you, too. Luke leaned in, his movements slow and respectful, giving her every chance to pull away. She didn't met him halfway. Their first kiss was soft and honest, a tender promise of hope and new beginnings. This wasn't about a forced marriage anymore. It wasn't about fear or a sense of duty. This was real. This was love. Harper had finally found her home. Not in a sprawling mansion or a vast fortune, but right here, in Luke's heart. Thanks for watching our story unfold. If you were moved by Harper's journey, make sure to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell so you don't miss what happens next. See you in the next video.